Hey everyone, it's Matt from Zenshop, and today's video I'm going to be talking about building a Shopify app with Remix, and a little talk about our landing page with Next.js. But before we begin, I just want to say a huge thanks to all our recent subscribers. I know a lot of you joined when I talked about Flutter, and I'm going to have some new videos shortly with all the awesome things we're doing with Flutter. But for today's talk, I'm going to talk about the Shopify app and Remix. So I'm a member of the Shopify Discord channel under Mac Wilco. So if you're there, you can always say hi. And I've noticed there's been a lot of questions, in fact, on this Discord about sort of basic things. How do I build a Shopify app? How do I get data? How do I do OAuth? Those kinds of questions. Well, for the last month, I've actually been building a brand new Shopify app. Using the latest template from Shopify, which is the Remix one. I've upgraded the CLI. I've used the app extension. And I just wanted to talk about how I built the app, kind of experience I had whilst I was doing it, and share with you some thoughts about Remix as a technology. But overall, I could summarize it and say I'm very happy with the experience. I think Shopify themselves have done a huge amount of work in the last year, I think, to make the developer experience better for app developers. However, what I have noticed is the complexity of building apps has also increased a little bit with these changes in mind. And there's probably technologies in here which many developers are probably not so familiar with. So that's the reason why I'm seeing probably lots of questions in the Discord about sort of things. How do I do this and such? Because people are just less familiar with these approaches of getting data. But they're actually very simple, really. They're not too complicated. So let's talk about it a bit more. So you can see in front of us, in fact, the Shopify admin. And this is our new app for Zenshop. Unfortunately, I can't show you a particularly wonderful version of it. This is a test store. It doesn't have any messages in the store yet. But what you'd normally see is a little graph. I'm using the Polaris Viz package, and it's quite nice. It shows you a great little graph of the data. And I'm also using the Polaris 12 design system. So when you start the Shopify app currently, I think it's using version 11, which is a little bit outdated. But I wanted to use the latest design language from Shopify. It fits in with the new theme. So you can see all the buttons, the cards and things, they fit in with the new design language. And the app itself is not super complicated. It allows you to do basic things. But it allows you to create an FAQ, configure your team, change your plan, create a mailbox, manage your account, those kinds of things. There's also an app extension which installs to your store, which embeds a little chat widget. So that's also something worth talking about, I suppose. And if you guys have more questions or you want to learn more about how I did certain things on the app, I'm always welcome to answer the questions. Just put a comment in the video. And I can either make new content on it and so on. I'm not going to create full tutorials on how to build entire Shopify apps from scratch, but I can cover certain specific things for you if it's interesting. So the thing I wanted to talk about most, which I think throws people a lot off in Remix, is this idea of loaders and actions. And how you get data. So the screen in front of us is showing some data to the user, right? And if you're familiar with React, then you're familiar with probably things like function components, use state, use effect, use callback, all those kinds of things. That's all pretty much the same in Remix. The difference that you'll notice when you build a page in Remix is you're encouraged to use things like loaders and actions. So you'll have your function component exported, but additionally, you'll also export two more functions, a loader and an action. And that loader in action will be the way that you receive data to your component via the loader, and how you handle changing data with a post using the action. So if you understand that, then you probably understand most of what you need to do in order to build a Shopify app with Remix. So let's cover that. So I'm going to briefly talk about the routing as well. So you'll notice in the app, there's lots of different routes, and these files correspond to routes. So you have the app index here. This is the first page. Then you'll have additional pages here. So this is the FAQ page. This is the FAQ page with an article ID parameter in the URL, as a mailbox page, so on, so on, so on. So if you want, basically those files correspond to routes, and it's not that difficult. So let's go to the FAQ, and we're going to have a very simple example. This is an index page. So if I go there, it's literally showing me a list of articles or FAQs. And it's got a title and a status. So it's the title, save it, and status live. And I can do things like I can navigate here. I can create a new FAQ item. And this will cover the create, read, update cycle of stuff. So I have my function component, and this function does the markup for the page. So you've got the page object, back button, title, a card, all those kinds of things. It was all kind of standard markup. And the difference is that in the Remix way is you have this loader. So the loader will give you a request object, and specifically for Shopify apps, what you would want to do in the loaders normally is authenticate the request and get something like a session, or it could be the Shopify admin object. So if I did admin, and the admin object would allow you to call things like GraphQL requests or REST requests here. So you could execute a GraphQL request from Shopify, and it's authenticated with that store because you've done the authentication, and you'll be able to get data from Shopify specific to that page that you're doing. In this case, I'm actually going to call my own API. So I authenticate the zenshop API additionally, and I pass in the Shopify session so I know which store is doing this request. And then I can grab the FAQ articles here from my own API and then return JSON to the function component via this hook. So it's called use loader data. So from this use data loader, I can now display, just as you would normally do in a React component, the articles. So that was the kind of only real difference I remember from starting initially with Remix. One thing to bear in mind is when you're inside this code, it's executing server-side. So this code will block the UI, in fact, until it's returned. So if your API requests are a little bit slow, it's worth bearing that in mind. But what you can do now with some latest changes, I haven't fully done this yet because I think I will upgrade all my pages shortly to use this, is something called defer. So I can show you that actually in the index page. So what I encountered was when I was building this app is the first load of this page is important to make fast, and unfortunately my dashboard is a little bit slow. It takes too long really to load all that data. So I looked at Remix ways of making this less slow. And what you need to use is defer. So in this page, let's go back again. I'll just show it to you. So here, for example, I'm going to another page, and then I'm going back to the home page, and you'll see there's it's like a skeleton object for that particular component. Because the rest of the components load really fast, so I don't need to worry about blocking the UI for those things so much. But I was worried about this one taking a bit too long to load in. Let's do it again. There you go, skeleton, and boom, load the graph. Okay, so in that case, you want to change the loader. Rather than returning JSON like I showed you in that previous example, you need to use the defer keyword. So you import it just the same way as you would here, JSON. Right now you do defer, and rather than awaiting the API request, you simply you get the promise. So this is a promise for a dashboard, and I pass in the dashboard promise to the client. And from here, when I do when I get the loader data, I'm actually getting a promise back. And from the promise, I can then do a suspense and await. So there's that code there. And you can see I'm using a skeleton body text in the card as a fallback. So whilst the suspense await is doing its thing in resolving the promise, this card is shown. And then once I've got the resolved promise, I can then do a little bit of massaging the data. It's probably a bit ugly, unfortunately, but I did do this quite quickly, this app. And then from there, I can display my graph. One thing also to bear in mind is because of the nature of rendering, I think with Remix is I wasn't able actually to render these graphs in immediately with Remix. I needed to use this client-only component, which forces the rendering to always use the client-side rendering, like normal React rendering. Remix does some additional magic. I don't quite fully understand it all, but it does server-side rendering as well. And it was not working. It was not happy with the GraphQL, the Graph Polaris Viz package that I was using, and I found out that I had to use the client-only package. You can also grab that from the Remix utils, and that will then fix the issues that you might have with rendering packages which deliberately need client-side rendering. Okay, so that's how you kind of get data with Remix. The specific things maybe for Shopify, which is worth showing you, is how do you make a GraphQL request with Shopify? So again, in the loader, you want to do the GraphQL requests in loaders, and they happen here. So you can see, for example, I've got another example of calling the admin API with a GraphQL request. And then I get the JSON, I do some stuff with it, and then eventually I'll return it back to the user interface. And then you can do things with that data via the use data loader hook. So that's the getting data side. The other question I've seen a lot is how do I do things, like how do I action stuff? How do I make changes to data? So that typically happens via a use action, an action function. So you can see here, for example, just like you've got the loader, I've also got an action. Okay, so an action is typically invoked via a something in your component. I use submit as the way of doing this, and this submit hook allows you to post data to your action method. So for example, I've got a button to dismiss a banner, right? And what I do is I persist this banner dismissal so that they don't see that banner again. And I store it in the user's session. Of course, I could have just used a hook, and I do. I have some local state to the client saying, hey, you've dismissed the banner. But I also want to make sure that they don't see this banner again when they refresh the page. So, of course, normally that state would get wiped out if they refresh the page. But in this case, it won't because it's stored also in the session. I'm able to grab the banner hidden property from the user session here in the loader. And then I set that as the initial state for the banner hidden local state. And when the user clicks dismiss banner, it calls this function. And then I set the local state, you're hidden. So then it immediately disappears from the user's perspective. But in the background, I'm also submitting some changes via the submit here. So I'm posting data as an action. So I've got an action. I've used an underscore action method, and I'll explain why in a second. Posting that data, dismiss banner. Okay, so what happens then is this will come through to this action method. And I can do form data basically. It's a form data, and I check what type of action it is. So in this case, I've actually got two different types of actions that I could have done. I could have I've got this one, and I've got the dismiss banner one. So because I'm dismissing the banner, I want to call specifically a little API request I've got to persist that banner state as hidden. And then once that's finished, it then refreshes the page, basically. So that's how kind of actions work in general, honestly. I've got all sorts of different actions, and they all work exactly the same way. You have a button, you submit the data as a post request, it comes back through to this an action method here. I do some stuff with the data, and then I return JSON back to the client. Maybe, a toast message, for example. I want to say, please check your inbox. In that case, what happens is a toast message will be received. Where is it? So one also additional thing worth knowing is you have use loader data, and that's returned from your loader, obviously. But you've also got, where is it? Okay, I don't think I'm actually showing that yet. Oh, no, I am. Here we go. Yes, that's it. So one small thing, I'm not sure I did this right or not, and probably I'm doing it wrong, is I wanted to separate out the components for certain things. So I've got a little card which actually does that action of submitting the data. But I found that actually I couldn't have my own action method within a component. So you can see here I'm in a component. But I don't think components support their own actions. It has to be part of a root. So roots here can have loaders and actions, but components by themselves can't. But please correct me if I'm wrong. I think that's what I discovered in this particular instance. But what I was able to find is by submitting the data in the component. So here, for example, I'm posting resend. It actually goes up to the root. So the root handles the action. And also, interestingly, the use action data hook is dropped down to the component that's inside the root. So here, for example, I'm taking that toast message, which was returned to me back from the action method, and I'm using a use effect here to call Shopify app bridge to toast that message. So when the user clicks resend me the email verification, it does a post request. It calls an API, and then the API then returns back successful. I've sent you that email, and then I get that success via this use action data, just like you would do in use loader data as a message. And whenever that message changes, I call Shopify app bridge to toast and show a little pop up. Interestingly, for Shopify app bridge, I don't think you can use directly Shopify app bridge methods within loaders and actions because they are specifically server side. They don't run on the client side. And Shopify app bridge is being built specifically for client side interactions. So that's worth bearing in mind as well. There's some things I do in the app which I've been utilizing more of Shopify app bridge, and I'll get better at as I learn more about how to build Shopify apps. One thing I've found that's useful to do is, okay, so let's say, for example, I have something like this. So I'm going to click on a card and it's going to do some things, and just notice what it's doing. Like, for example, here, I'm going to, you can see that I've now shown this banner at the top. So that's nothing complicated. It's just, I'm noticing that you might be changing something. So this is a context save object banner, and it's letting the user save and discard changes in a resource. So, but what happens here, for example, is I'm really changing something. You see this loading bar at the top? It kind of like started loading, and I'm using that because I wanted to indicate to the user that we're doing something. I'm going to do it again so you can see. There you go. Boop. And that's because every time I toggle this, I'm actually going to re-render the iframe because this whole app is actually an iframe, right? Because Shopify themselves embed your app as an iframe within Shopify admin. But in my particular case, I also needed to have an additional iframe for displaying this messenger object. So I could customize it in relatively quickly. So I needed to refresh my own iframe to display these changes. So here I toggle the FAQ, it's visible and it's not visible. And it took a little while, so I wanted to show a loading indicator. And that's using Shopify app bridge, and it has to happen client side. So the other things you can also do is Remix gives you some indication about what's actually changing in the page. So I'm going to click this button here, and notice that the buttons will show a loading spinner. Oh, no, they don't. Okay, maybe I'll change that. Probably. I might need to click save, in fact. Yeah, there we go. Okay. I think the save button takes a little longer, so it shows the spinner. The discard button doesn't. I think it just redirects you back to the original page. So let's do that again. So I'm gonna make a change, and then I'm gonna click save, and then it's doing something, and then it's re-rendering the page. So if you want to do things like that, you want to show some indication something's happening. Let me see if I can find where that is in the code again. It's this one. Yeah, there we go. So here is the code. We're checking the save action is got a little flag saying I'm loading, and what you can do is you can check your navigation object. So you can use this object here. I think it's at the top here somewhere. Yeah, use navigation. So that's a hook from Remix, and the use navigation object lets you let's find it again. There we go. You can kind of, there's a property called form data, and you can get the action that I'm doing. So in this case, it's commit. So it's useful to like specify. There's a button that does something, and I want to show a loading indicator on that button. So I can find out this action associated with that button is currently happening from this bit here. And it's currently submitting. So there's a state from the navigation. So the navigation state is either loading, idle, or submitting. So I think the loading is just the page is loading. The submitting is pages sending data, and the idle is just I'm idle. I'm not doing anything. So this action commit is happening, and the navigation state is currently submitting. So that's currently loading, and that's why it starts spinning. I found that really useful. I use it all over the app. Wherever I do something actionable, it shows a loading indicator. I can also show you here in the actual FAQ. So if I click down here, configure my FAQ. Okay, click save. You see the saving buttons happen. And I also toast a message. I like that. So it confirms to the user everything's been saved. But you can also do things like this too. So if I want to unpublish the article from the messenger, I can confirm it with a modal, and then unpublished. And it's also useful to use these kind of banners for important state. I think it's useful to know that this FAQ is not currently published. So I alert that to user. And there's also things like delete. So if I delete, you can pop up a confirmation that you want to actually delete it. So that's all built into Polaris. I think Polaris's design system encourages you to work that kind of way because it's kind of familiar with how Shopify stores would normally interact with their store. Yeah. So this Shopify app also includes things around billing. I haven't seen too many questions on that related on the Discord, but if you're curious about how to do Shopify billing, I might make another video on that too. But that was my experience of building the Shopify app, and it's been really positive. Really enjoyed it, and I'll probably make some more videos. If you leave a comment, I'll talk more about certain topics around Shopify app building. And just want to quickly show you this. This is the landing page. So let's do that again. Yeah. This is a brand new landing page. It includes a lot of like nice little animations. It's responsive. And it took me probably actually took me longer, in fact, than the Shopify app. Mostly because I'm not using any style, system. I'm just literally using CSS modules and hand coding all the CSS myself. So making it responsive, making it all laid out nicely, doing those little animations, it really took quite a long time. But it was definitely worth it. So that uses Next.js. And I would say that if I was comparing the two frameworks now, which I feel like I honestly can, like I built an app with Next.js, and I've also built an app with Remix. From what I've seen so far of them, is that Next.js is more suitable for building landing pages, primarily because it has some really good image optimization. Like I noticed it was super easy to get my images like super crisp and rendering really, really nicely and fast with Next.js. And I think that's because of the interplay between Vercel and Next.js. So if you're willing to use Next.js's way of doing things with images, it has a lot of benefits for building like a really nice landing page. But I would say that the Remix way of doing things has a better approach for building like full stack web applications. I know that Next.js has also got that ability, but I think Remix has, if you're building an actual app that people are using for like forms and complicated things like this, Remix is just a little bit better. And it's also integrated with Shopify, because Shopify themselves are using it for all of their tooling. So I think if you're building a Shopify app, definitely use Remix. And you could also use it for a landing page, in fact, as well. But I think Next.js has made a really nice integration with Versal and their whole back-end infrastructure to make it super easy for you. So that's why I'm using Next.js for the landing page. So there's loads of awesome stuff coming up soon. And I'm going to be building real-time integration with live chat. This is, Ably actually gave me a lovely mug, and I'm very thankful to them. I'm going to be building live chat, and I'm also doing meta integration for a little bug behind me or something. It's really buzzing. Okay. I'm going to be doing live chat, Instagram, Facebook, meta integration kind of things. That's all coming over the next 2 months, I think. So I'm going to be super, super busy. And I'll try and make content related to all these things for you as well. And of course, we'll have some more Flutter app improvements coming down the road too. Thanks so much for your support. And if you've got any questions to me, just drop a comment in the video. I'll try and respond to you. And if you have any ideas for content as well, I'll do my best. Thanks so much. See you. Bye.